Hello, welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Misery. Chapter 33. He jerked, expecting the shotgun blast. But she wasn't there, of course. His mind had already recognized the dream. Not a dream, a warning. She could come back anytime at all. The quality of the light fanning through the half-open bathroom door had changed, grown brighter. Looked like noon light. He wished the clock would chime and tell him just how close to right he was, but the clock was obstinately silent. She stayed away 50 hours before. So she did, and she might stay away at 80 this time, or you might hear that Cherokee pulled in 5 seconds from now. In case you didn't know, friend, the Weather Bureau can post a tornado warning, but when it comes to telling exactly when and where they'll touch down, they don't know fuck all. True enough, he said, and rolled the wheelchair down to the bathroom. Looking in, he saw an austere room floored with hexagonal lights, a bathtub with rusty fans spreading below the faucets that stood on closed feet. Besides, it was a linen closet. Across from the tub was a sink. Over the sink was a medicine cabinet. The floor bucket was in the tub. He could see the plastic top. The hole was wide enough for him to swing the chair around and face the door, but now his arms were trembling with exhaustion. He had been a puny kid, and so when he tried to take reasonably good care of himself as an adult, but his muscles were now the muscles of an invalid, and the puny kid was back, as if all that time spent doing laps and jogging and working out the Nautilus machine had only been a dream. At least the store was wider. Not much, but enough to make the package less hair-raising. Paul bumped over the lintel, and then the chair's hard rubber wheels rolling smoothly over the tiles. He smelled something sour that automatically associated with hospitals. Lysol, maybe. There was no toilet in there, but he had already suspected that. The only flushing sound came from upstairs. And now that he thought of it, one of those flushes upstairs always followed his use of the bedpan. Here there was only the tub, the basin, and the linen closet with door standing open. He gazed briefly at the neat piles of blue towels and washcloth. He was familiar with both from the sponge bath it had given him, and then turned his attention to the medicine cabinet over the washstand. It was out of reach. No matter how much he strained, it was a good 9 inches above the tip of his fingers. He could see this, but reached away, unable to believe the fate of God or whoever could be so cruel. He looked like an outfielder reaching desperately for a home run ball he had absolutely no chance of catching. Paul made a wounded, baffled noise, lowered his hand, and then leaned back, panting. The gray cloud lowered. He willed it away and looked around for something he could use to open the medicine cabin door, and saw the cedar mop leaning stiffly in the corner on the long blue pole. "You going to use that, really? Well, I guess you could. Pry open the medicine cabinet door, and then just knock a bunch of stuff out in the basin. But the bottles will break, and even if there are no bottles, fat chance everyone has at least a bottle of Listerine or Scope or something in their medicine cabinet. You have no way of putting back what you knocked down. So when she comes back and sees the mess, what then?" I'll tell her it was misery," he croaked. "I'll tell her she dropped by looking for a tonic to bring her back from the dead." Then he burst into tears. But even through his tears were conning the room, looking for something, anything, inspiration to break, just to fucking... He was looking to the linen closet again, as rapid breathing suddenly stopped. His eyes widened. His first cursory glance had taken the shelves with their stacks of folded sheets and pillowcases and washcloths and towels. Now he looked at the floor, and on the floor were a number of square board cartons. Some were labeled Upjohn, some were labeled Lilly, others were labeled Cam Pharmaceuticals. He turned the wheelchair roughly, hurt himself not caring. Please God, don't let her be a cache of extra shampoo or tampons or pictures of her dear old sainted mother, or... He fumbled for one of those boxes, dragged it out, and opened the flaps. No shampoo, no Avon samples, far from it. There was a wild jumble of drugs in the card, most of them in small boxes marked samples. At the bottom of a few pills and capsules, different colors rolled around loose. Some, like Morin and Lopressor, the hypertension drug her father had taken the last 3 years of life, he knew. Others he had never heard of. Novril, he muttered, raking silently through the box while sweat ran down his face and his legs pounded and throbbed. Novril, where's the fucking Novril? No Novril. He pushed the flaps of the carton and shoved it back to the linen closet, making only a token effort to replace it in the same place it had been. It should be alright. The place looking like a goddamn junk heap. Leaning far to his left, he was able to snag a second carton. He opened it and was able to credit what he was seeing. Darvocire, Darwin compound, Morphos and Morphos complex, Librium, Valium, and Novril. Dozens and dozens and dozens of sample boxes. Lovely boxes. Dear boxes. Oh, lovely, dear, sainted boxes. He clawed one open and saw the caps associated given every 6 hours enclosed in their little blisters. Not to be dispensed without physician's prescription, the box said. Oh, dear Jesus, the doctor is in, Paul saw. He tore the cellophane apart with his teeth and chewed up 3 capsules, barely aware of their bruisingly bitter taste. He halted, stared at the 5 that were left encased in their mutilated cellophane sheet, and gobbled a 4th. He looked around quickly, chin down on his breastbone, eyes crafty and frightened. Although he knew it was too soon to be feeling any relief, he did feel it. Having the pills, it seemed, was even more important than taking the pill. As if he had been given control of the moon and the tides, or just reached up and taken it. It was a huge thought, though awesome, and also frightening, with undertones of guilt and blasphemy. If she comes back now... Alright, okay, I get the message. He looked back at the carton, trying to calculate how many sample boxes he might have been able to take without realizing. A little mouse named Paul Sheldon had been nibbling away at the supply. He giggled at this, a shrill, relieved sound, and he realized the medication wasn't just working on his legs. He had gotten his fix, if you want to be perfectly vulgar about it. Get moving, idiot. You have no time to enjoy being stoned. He took 5 of the boxes, a total of 30 capsules. He had restrained himself from taking more. He stirred at the remaining boxes and bottles around, hoping the result would look into more or less helter-skelter than it had been when he first peered into the box. He refolded the flaps and flipped the box back into the linen closet. A car was coming. He straightened up, eyes wide, hands dropped to the arms of the wheelchair and gripping them with panicky tightness. If it was Annie, he screwed, and that was the end of it. He would never be able to maneuver this bulky, oversized thing back to the bedroom in time. Maybe he could whack her once with a cedar mop or something before she wrung his neck like a chicken. He sat in the wheelchair with the sample boxes of Novril in his lap, and his broken legs stiffing softly out in front of him, and waited for the car to pass or turn in. The sound swelled endlessly, then began to diminish. Okay, do you need a more graphic warning, Paul, baby? As a matter of fact, he did not. He took a final glance at the cartons. They looked at him about as when they first seen them. Although he had been looking at them, there were haze of pain and could not be completely true, but he knew the piles of boxes might not be as random as they had looked. Oh, not at all. She had the heightened awareness of the deeply neurotic and might not have had the position of each glass carefully memorized. She might want to take one glass casual here and there and immediately realize in some carnane way what had happened. This knowledge did not bring fear, but a sense of resignation. He had needed the medication, he had somehow managed to escape his room and get it. If there were consequences, punishment, he could face them, at least the understanding that he would have done nothing but what had done. And of course, all she'd done to him, this resignation, was surely a symptom of the worst. She had turned into a pain-racked animal with no moral options at all. He slowly backed into the wheelchair across the bathroom, glancing behind himself occasionally to make sure he wasn't way off course. Before, such a movement would have made him scream with pain, but now the pain was disappearing under a beautiful glassiness. He rolled into the hall, and then stopped as a terrible thought struck him. If the bathroom had been slightly damp or even dirty, he stared at it, and for a moment the idea he must have left tracks on those clear white tiles was so pervasive he actually saw them. He shook his head and looked again. No tracks, but the door was open farther than it had been. He rolled forward, swung the wheelchair slightly to the right so he could lean over and grab the knob and then pull the door half closed. He eyed it and then pulled it a bit closer to the jab. There, looked all right. He was reaching for the wheels, meaning to pivot the chair so he could roll back into the room, when he realized he was pointing more or less toward the living room. And the living room was where most people kept their telephone in. Lightning burst in his mind like a flare over foggy meadow. "Hello, Sidewinder Police Station, Officer Humbuggy speaking." "Listen to me, Officer Humbuggy. Listen very carefully, don't interrupt, because I don't know how much time I have. My name is Paul Sheldon. I'm calling you from Annie Wilkes' house. I've been a prisoner here for the last 2 weeks, maybe as long as a month. Annie Wilkes, get out of here right away. Send an ambulance, and for Christ's sake, get her before she gets back." "Before she gets back," Paul moaned. "Oh yeah, far out. What makes you even think she even has a phone? Who have never heard her call? Who would she call? Her good friends, the roadmans, just because she doesn't have any chatter with all day doesn't mean she's incapable of understanding the accidents happen. She could fall on the stairs and break an arm or leg. The barn might catch on fire. How many times have you heard this supposed telephone ring? So, there's a requirement, your phone has to ring at least once a day or Mountain Bell comes and takes it out. Besides, I haven't been conscious most of the time. You're pushing your luck. You're pushing your luck and you know it." Yes, he knew it, but he thought of the telephone. She imagined the sensation of the cool black plastic under his fingers, the click of the rotary dial, or the single booping sound as the touch tone. These were seductions too great to resist. He worked the wheelchair around until it was directly facing the parlor, and then he rolled into it. The place smelled musty, unaired, obscurely tired. Although the curtains guarding the bow windows were only half drawn, affording a lovely window of the mountains, the room seemed dark. Because its colors were too dark, he thought. Dark red predominated, as if someone pulled a great venous blood in here. Over the mantel was a tinted portrait of a forbidding woman with tiny eyes buried in a fleshy face. The rosebud mouth was pursed. The photograph, enclosed in it, was a Rococo frame of gold gilt, about the size of the president's photograph in the lobby of the big city post office. Paul did not need to notarize statement to tell him that this was Annie's sainted mother. He rolled farther in the room. The left side of the wheelchair struck a small, occasional table covered with ceramic gewgaws. They chatted together, and one of them, a ceramic penguin sitting on a ceramic ice block, fell the side. Without thinking, he reached in and grabbed it. The gesture was almost casual, and the reaction set in. He held the penguin so tight gently in his crowfish, trying to will the shakes away. You caught it, no sweat. Besides, there's a rug on the floor. Probably wouldn't have broken it anyway. But if it had, his mind had screamed, if it had, please have to go back to your room before you're leaving a track. No, not yet. No, not yet. How frightened he was because this had cost him too much. If this were a playoff, he was gonna have it. He looked around the room, which was stuffed with heavy, graceless furniture. Should have been dominated by the bow windows and the gorgeous view of the Rockies beyond them, but was instead dominated by the picture of the fleshy woman imprisoned in the ghastly, glaring frame with its twists and curly keys and frozen gilded wings. On a table at the far end of the couch, where she would sit to watch TV, there was a plain dialer telephone. Gently, hardly daring to breathe, he put the ceramic penguin, now my tale is told, the legend on the block of ice read, back of the knick-knack table, and read across the room toward the phone. There was an occasional table in front of the sofa. He gave it a wide berth. On it was a spray of dried leaves in an ugly green vase, and the whole thing looked top-heavy, ready to tip over if he so much as brushed it. No cars coming outside, only the sound of the wind. He grasped the handset of the phone in one hand and slowly picked it up. A queer, predestined sense of failure filled his mind even before he got the handset in his ear and heard nothing. He received the receiver slowly, a line from an old Roger Miller song, occurring to him and seeming to make a certain senseless sense. No phone, no pool, no pets. I ain't got no cigarettes. He traced the phone cord with his eye, saw the small square module on the baseboard, saw that the jack was plugged into it. Everything looked in perfect working order, like the barn with its heat tapes. Keeping up appearances is very, very important. He closed his eyes and saw Annie removing the jack and screaming Elmer's glue into the hole in the module. Saw her placing the jack in the dead white glue where it would harden and freeze forever. The phone company would have no idea that anything was wrong unless somebody attempted to call her or report the line out of service. But no one called Annie, did they? She would receive regular monthly bills on her deadline, and she would pay them promptly, but the phone was only stage dressing, part of the never-ending battle to keep up appearances. Like the neat barn with its fresh red paint and cream trim and heat tapes to melt the winter ice. Had she castrated the phone in case of such an expedition as this? Had she foreseen the possibility he might get out of the room? He doubted it. The phone, the working phone, would have gotten on her nerves long before he came. She never would have lain awake at night, looking at the ceiling of her bed and listening to the high country whine of the wind, imagining people who must be thinking of her with either like or dislike or outright malevolence. All the world's roadie-men, people who, at any of them, at any time, take a notion to call her on the telephone and scream, "You did it, Annie! They took you all the way to Denver and you did it. They don't take you all the way in Denver if you're innocent." She would have asked for and gotten an unlisted number, of course. Anyone tried and acquitted of some major crime. And if it had been Denver, it must have been major, would have done just that. But even an unlisted number would not keep a deep neurotic like Annie Wilkes for long. They were all in league against her. They would get the number if they wanted. Probably the lawyers who had been against her would be glad to pass it out to anyone who would ask for it. And people would ask. Oh yes, for all she would see the world as a dark place full of moving human masses like seas. A malevolent universe surrounding a single small stage upon which a sadly seeing bright pin spot illuminated only her. So the best to eradicate the phone, silence it, as she would have silenced him if she knew he had gotten him this far. Panic burst shrilly up his mind, telling him that he had to get out there and back into his room, hide the pills, hide somewhere, return to his place by the window so that when she returned, she would see no difference at all. And this time he agreed with his voice. He agreed wholeheartedly. He backed carefully in the room away from the phone. And when he gained the room's one reasonable clear area, he began the laborious job of turning the wheelchair around, careful not to bump the occasional table as he did so. He had nearly finished when he turned when he heard an approaching car, simply knew it was her returning from town. And I'm going to end it right there. Thanks for listening.